Because the one thing we want to do is to feel Baba's constant presence. Very real, very formidable. That expression that Baba used one time, when you're not thinking about me, you're vulnerable. That has to be absolutely understood in its literal sense, because it is absolutely true. But when we see it, obviously, the more we see the truth of it, the more we will be definitely motivated to making a greater effort to think of him. And with that kind of motivation, because we do understand more, we will be thinking about him in a different way, a more meaningful way. I am closer to you than your own breath. Must become more than words, and they will become more than words. There's no question about it. The inevitability of having belief in someone who is God-realized. The God-realized person helps creation, he helps the individual. He helps creation indirectly, that is to say, all the other individuals who do not know about him, he affects them indirectly. But the individual who is consciously aware of the God-man focuses on him, tries to make that incredible fact of existence, the total reality in human form, tries to comprehend that, to bring that within some kind of a working relationship with the thoughts that the individual has. I have thoughts. Here is this staggering fact. How does my conscious mind, with its usual preoccupation with thoughts, deal with this staggering fact? Well, the fact has to become more and more staggering. When it becomes more and more staggering, there's less and less difficulty in dealing with it. And Baba says, and ultimately love, he said. Do you remember those statements that Baba made? Certain instructions or admonitions. Do this, do that, do this, don't do that, don't do this. And then the next to the last one he said, and try to love me. But the last thing he said was, but if you cannot, do not worry, because I love you. See? I can't even conceive of anybody who is as broad-minded as that. I mean, everything about Baba is enough to make you really draw close to him. My first experience, what an overwhelming friend. Really friend. When I used to think about Baba and I used to think about the word friend, every hair on my body stood up. Friend. When I thought of Baba as the friend, I didn't even know that spiritual aspirants like Rumi used the word friend when he was referring to God. I didn't even know that. See? Which means that where did that kind of a concept, understanding come from? We each are God, So God makes his presence felt as we focus on him. So we will come up with similar concepts, won't we? We're bound to. You might disguise the language, but that doesn't make any difference. Doesn't make any difference. When there's reality in something, in some odd form, it's the reality that comes through that oddity. Truth comes through it. Words can be very clumsy, or words can be very unfamiliar. When you read spiritual discourses that are rooted in, let's say, a foreign kind of an idiom, an unfamiliar kind of context, like Hinduism, Mohammedanism, any kind of ism. And the words were the utterances of those who knew and experienced. That's what comes through. You're not put off, you're not confused by the unfamiliarity of the expression. It's the truth that comes through. This was my experience in reading the Bhagavad Gita for the very first time. This was my experience in reading self-knowledge, the Upanishads. And what was it? The truth inside was corresponding to what I was reading. So, yes, that discourse is very timely. And I sort of shy away from saying, well, this is an unusual time we're living in. But I suppose if you are being pretty accurate in terms of what you're feeling, then you can say Well, in the first place, I somehow sense, particularly with those Baba people I've known for a long time, I somehow sense the similar direction that we all travel, the similar thoughts that begin to be meaningful to us, in spite of the external differences. So it seems as though there is a correlation. You awaken to a correlation in the work, the universal work that Baba does, and what begins to become meaningful to you, or what you begin to see that you didn't see before. Like passing a building that you've passed for many, many years, and at one time somehow your attention is drawn to that building. It's though you saw it for the first time, even though you went past it every day. We gradually have to see the difficult things that happen to us in a different way. Because in truth, in the Baba community, when I say Baba community, I'm merely talking about those people who believe he is what he says he is. That these difficulties occurring to people in that kind of a community are really little love slaps from Baba. We certainly can easily imagine much worse things happening. And the difficulty that is there is that in spite of the way we feel, to struggle to accept it as his will, and his will works for our highest good in the easiest way. Our effort is to struggle to accept that. And then Baba would have us even go further than that. He said, then you get to the place where you become cheerful in your acceptance of it. Well, we know that's hard. If we know it's hard, he certainly knows it's hard. You know what it's like when you have concern for someone else, when you have feelings for someone else. You're able to forget yourself to that extent. And here's Baba who has total concern for you. Total concern. We have to begin to identify in terms that we can understand and appreciate and feel something more exalted in Baba so that we draw to him. The strange thing is God himself is saying, try to love me. That's really strange because it seems to be so contrary to every religion, as it is practiced anyway. God himself says, try to love me. This is really remarkable. That always staggers me. I can be walking along and I'll stop, almost become transfixed. Because it's something that you want to grip somehow, find the way to deal with that. And yet, it's that kind of thinking that is meaningful. Even though Baba said that you can't really understand. I use this story over and over again about holding up God speaks, and Baba says in 58, who understands this? And I don't remember who responded, or if anyone responded. I don't remember anyone responding, but anyway, that's not important. What was important was what Baba said. He says, I don't understand it myself. See, But yet, at the same time, he said, you must try to understand everything I've said. And one way, certainly, of understanding the importance of this directive, or this admonishment on his part, is that our minds are trying to, our consciousness has to now preoccupy itself with the things that Baba has said. Baba said, think of me in any way that you can. In time you'll think of me in the right way. Anything that makes you think about me or helps you to think about me is good. See, anything. So if you have a picture of Baba, some people don't like hanging up pictures, or some people don't like wearing the whatever on their sleeves, or going around and holding up signs, or this kind of thing. But if to that person it is helpful at that person's place to make him think about Baba more, that is a good thing. That's what Baba's saying. That's why we really can't, it's not our place to judge anyway. What does Baba say in one of his discourses? Do not waste your precious lifespan judging and criticizing your fellow man. But that's got to be so deeply and grippingly felt and understood. Do not waste. No, what does that say? It says, if you see a mountain of things to criticize in another person. He's that gross. You see? Baba is saying, do not waste your precious lifespan. Waste. God himself is saying, do not waste your precious lifespan judging and criticizing your fellow man. He is saying that there is something priceless for you to be preoccupying yourself with rather than that. See? That's what he wants us to think about. I feel that if you're in Baba's family, you're very special, which means you've had past relationship with him, see? And for some reason or another, notwithstanding this exalted relationship, we seem to be living rather ordinary lives. Well, if a person struggles to not be ordinary, when he sees everything about himself as ordinary, I feel that Baba, in an avataric period, is taking that effort on the part of that individual and infinitely multiplying that energy and using it for his universal spiritual work. So that individual's effort is not ordinary. In the first place, it's authored by God himself. That's the motivation. You're not conscious of that so much, but that's the motivation. How could that be ordinary if it's motivated by God himself? Everything's motivated by God, but this is a motivation which brings you directly to him. The significance, again, of being in the Baba community, that you believe in him, is that you go directly to the avatar, directly to the goal, directly. You know, Baba said, many things that point up to one basic statement, that he controls every little thing. You can work that out in any way you want to. And to me that means whether or not you go to India, or when you go to India, all of these things. Now, unless we know everything, we're going to be trying to do this and trying not to do that. Even when we say he controls everything, to accept that totally means to be perfect. So we can't. But it's important to try to remember and feel the truth of the fact that every little event is controlled by someone who is the only one totally concerned about us. I mean, I think that's magnificent. But to realize that everything that happens he's the author of that. That means whether or not we go to India, or when we go to India. Now, in our limited state, we should always try to think the right things. My feeling about going to India is that I feel I will go very soon. I don't know. But my feeling is it's very important that I go to India. It's very important that I try to have the right relationship with Baba where I am. Because obviously he's everywhere. But then, should I go to India, I'm going to be far more receptive. Baba is wherever we are, but when we go into that atmosphere, the atmosphere, Baba says that most people in the world are shaped and chiseled by the forces of the environment. And the sociologists would agree with him. An individual who begins to come within that kind of consciousness that the God-man becomes increasingly important, increasingly the focal point of your attention. That individual is becoming aware of the fact he's like a rock where life moves around him. It's life that parts. The individual in that focus, in that conviction, stays where he is. And I think that in the Baba family, what we tried, perhaps part of the process of waking up, is to find out where we are. where we are in the sense we already believe in him, and to find out what that means in our daily lives. It's not a small thing at all. It's a very big thing. And our growth is to wake up to how big it is, because then that definitely begins to put the horse before the cart. Before that, it's the cart before the horse. Baba says, keep me in the front of your mind. Keep me in the front of your mind. So every event is controlled by him. That's a great source of relief. Even when we know we would prefer this rather than that, and that happens. It's a great sense of relief to know that everything that happens to us is for our highest good. And it's because of our conviction about the God-man, no matter how weak it is, that makes it possible for us to accept this. Another thing Baba once said was, which is very, very important to us, and it was this business about free will, because it does have a bearing. Because sometimes it becomes important for us to know, just tell me, do we have free will or not? He's totally in control. He's totally God. We're committed to him even in our weakness. What free will do we have? Everything that happens is preordained. Baba's response to that is, free will has always meant attitude. What happens to you is my will. How you take it is your will. Always. It's supremely important to try to remember that everything that happens is Baba's will. And by remembering that, to struggle to find a way to accept it. It's not easy. But it certainly should be possible when we begin to deal with the fact that we do believe that it is Baba's will, because he said so. And, gradually this can become acceptable to the intellect, and then the conviction goes beyond the intellect. How I would react to something I didn't like, believing in Baba, and how I would react to something I didn't like, not believing in Baba. See? I see a very substantial difference there. Basically, the difference means that I'm struggling to remember what belief in Baba is, and trying to focus in on that important reality, or trying to see it as a reality under those moments of stress. So there's a very, very big difference. There's a very big difference between the two. I've long since given up trying to, well, no, not long since given up. I don't think of spirituality anymore in the conventional sense. Well, it's been many, many years since I have. Spirituality to me, perhaps even way back, has always been a beautiful human being. A beautiful human being. It had nothing to do with labels. Had nothing to do with any external connections or any involvement with this, that, or the other thing. A beautiful human being was always beautiful, because that individual had the capacity for concern for someone else. And that was the capacity to believe in God in a real way. The mind fixed on the most important thing in creation, the only way, is to really work on it. A person wants to be intimate with Baba. A person wants to be intimate with God. What an incredible opportunity to have belief in the God-man. Because then it becomes possible to be intimate with God. It becomes possible. What the individual has to, I think, find out for himself is to wake up to the fact that all this talk about God is probably absolutely nothing but talk. All this apparent inspiration about God is not intimacy with God. That's what I believe. I believe that because it is so hard for me, and I believe in God. I believe in Baba being God in human form. And with that conviction, it's still hard. So I cannot help but believe that what appears to be interest by so many in God, in intimacy by so many with God, can't possibly be anything but some kind of an emotion. And of course, we're all familiar with emotions. Now, I'm not saying this in any way to disparage anyone, but I'm pointing up, I think, the rarity of that individual who achieves the slightest success in fixing his mind, you see, on the God-man, in the midst of the tremendous pressures of life, the tremendous distractions that are distractions because that's all you saw for millions of lifetimes. It's got to be that in the midst of sound sleep, your thought shouts at you and tells you you're asleep in the most eloquent way. That's what has to be done. It is so clear to me. It is so clear to me that one does not have Baba except through intense work. You could live with him every single day and it's not enough. You can believe in him 100% and it's not enough. You're not intimate with him because intimacy requires that you love him. You cannot love a stranger. You've got to know and believe with total conviction his concern for you personally. An intimacy that is far, infinitely beyond the intimacy of your own mother, if she happens to be a loving person. Far beyond that. Is that felt about Baba? No. And who first and foremost knows that we cannot love him easily? He knows that. He knows that he's the only one that deserves that love. And he knows that he's the only one that doesn't get it. You see? It's not easy. So how can I say anything other than fact that all of these pretensions about love for God are nothing but words? Cannot be. You become a crazy man like Hafiz. You think of nothing else. Night becomes day for you. That love can make midnight the blazing sun of noon. That's what that kind of love. That love transforms everything. Because there's no care about anything. There's no care. When you love, you don't care about less than love. That's why the world becomes an illusion. It becomes only an illusion when one loves because you don't care. That love is not to be had for nothing. It is not to be had for nothing. The conviction about the God-man is just the beginning. So, Baba explains all these things about meditation. He explains all these things about the spiritual path. But nothing of what he explains does anything to make you love him. But he said many times that our inquiring minds demand these answers from him. But at the same time, he made it clear that only holding on to him will enable us to begin to see something more and more about him that will gradually eclipse every other preoccupation that the mind from time immemorial has been fixed on. You see, it's not easy. It's not easy. The quietness of the mind is necessary to become sober for a moment. It's only in soberness, it's only in those few lucid moments when you're quiet that you see the worthwhileness of Baba. Then the world, like the sea, comes rushing in again. And what are you going to do then? See, unless you've learned to float on his reality, what are you going to do except to be drowned, engulfed, inundated? It's very hard. I tell you that because I've struggled very hard in my own way when I believed from the very beginning. But now I see a little daylight. I see a little daylight, and the daylight tells me everything is worthless except trying to find the way to feel his reality, to know his importance in that feeling. And his importance should more than hold you up. It should lift you up. It should lift you up. It should cause you to feel inspired. And it should bring you hope. It should help you much better to cope with all the dreadful things that we have to cope with. The dreadful things are dreadful because we are negative. Negativity is the illusion we call life being too real. Too real. Too real to us means there is nothing else. There is no hope. That's what depression is. There is no hope. No hope that we can become convinced about. Conviction of hope is a feeling. But it must endure. It must be able to withstand the hard knocks of life. That takes work. Like anything that we go after requiring effort, fixing the mind on it, training, working, spending much time. This is the greatest thing of all, and it's the reason for creation. It must require our time. So when we have been put in that school where alone it is possible to gain that wisdom, that fixity of mind, that realization of the importance of what we only intellectually know. When we have been put in that school, by that school I mean we are born in a lifetime. That is the time of the God-man. The God-man has come within our lives by somehow convincing us, by somehow drawing us, even the weakest interest in the God-man. By weak I mean we still persist in all of our waywardness, and at the same time we believe this man. That's what I mean by weak. But that is such an extraordinary school to be in. But we have to force ourselves to think about these things so that we will act on this. The world, everything that distracts us, we must come to the place where that very distraction is what forces us to reappreciate the importance of God-man in our lives as the way, the symbol of the ultimate meaning. The appearance of the God-man. The closer you see him, the more you'll appreciate him. He's not alien in all of his divinity, because the very fact that you love these qualities, that you begin to recognize, tells you something about your real self. That's why you love those qualities. So with any understanding at all, there's every reason to be hopeful. And if a person does not feel hopeful at any given moment, that person must realize that he sent his consciousness off on a very, very unpleasant journey, born by thoughts. Thoughts are always negative. Thoughts are always negative, or they're desire-ridden, or they're anticipating some kind of unfulfilling expectation. I'm going to get something, or I'm going to avoid something, whatever. You see, the thoughts about the God-man, Baba said, regarding everything that he's ever said or written, or all these incidents about his life, it can all be reduced to one thing, one thought. And this is what Baba said: anything that makes you think about me is a good thing. See? Anything. How simple he is. Baba knows everything, he controls everything, but he makes things simple because he knows how difficult it is for us. We must. And what draws us more is when we begin to feel his love. What's what he said? The only way to be intimate with me is to love me and to know that I love you. He's telling you, you can love me. You can know that I love you, but you don't know that now. You are not loving me now. But you will. You will. And he said, when you're not thinking about me, you're vulnerable. So in connection with what he said about thoughts, you really can't get rid of thoughts. And thoughts are what enslave us. Thoughts enslave us. So when you consider that statement, how it's been emphasized here, trying to make the mind blank. Blank from what? From thoughts. When you consider that, and then you consider Baba's statement, when you're not thinking about me, you're vulnerable, then you begin to see the importance of trying to train your mind to, first of all, appreciate Baba to the extent where it becomes easier to think about him, a perfect being. I was trying to grasp in some way for myself how to think about Baba. And I was thinking, well now, here's someone who is perfect. So I began to think, what is that? His infinite consciousness. He knows everything. He is the only one who has the capability of being concerned about my state of consciousness, about my feelings, about the freedom that I don't feel. He's the only one being infinite and perfect. Why shouldn't that be enough to cause my mind to always prefer to think about him rather than the many things it does think about? Why shouldn't that be enough? That leads to the next step. You say, well, I do think about other things, obviously. And that no matter how important, the thought about Baba is very important because he symbolizes something very great. But notwithstanding that, the mind allows itself to be captive of these thoughts, enslaved, which brings about worry, irritation, reaction, concern, which makes illusion reality. So the work, Baba says, is that you have to do more work to think about me. Remember, you have a way of knowing when you're not thinking about me. And you have a way of critically examining what that state of mind is in terms of its quality for your own personal well-being. You find it to be anything but desirable for the most part. But yet when you think about me, why is it you don't feel something more? It's because while you're thinking about me, your mind is still thinking about this over here. So you really can't see and appreciate what I really am. So Baba makes this very clear in many, 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 many ways. And I also tried to think, I said, now, where did my thoughts come from? My thoughts come from the beginning of time. The beginning of time meaning that as I gradually gained consciousness, that consciousness I gained was consciousness of illusion. And that has existed from time out of memory. That has existed from the vast, vast stretches of mind that the mind can conceive of. Such vastness. It's good to dwell on the vastness of that. And you say, that is how it is. Out of all of that vastness, out of all of that consciousness dwelling on nothing but illusion, I have come to this place where I am now. And I am expected, after all of that vastness that has enslaved my consciousness with thoughts whose roots are as deep as that vastness, I am expected to, in one fell swoop, even though I believe about the God-man, to expect that thought about the God-man to make me forget all of this. It doesn't work that way. The fact that you can even begin to forget all of this by thinking of the God-man is in itself a miracle if you begin to see how long you've come. The distance that we've come is unbelievable. To struggle very hard, and this is exactly what I tried to do. I tried to see, because first of all, I believed everything that Baba said. Even those things that I didn't understand, I nevertheless believed them, which made me wait patiently to try to understand them some way. That in itself was a miracle, because I believed him in spite of all of the vastness. And this is what helps us. But we have to work. We have to work. He said, you have to think of me over and over and over again. It's remarkable that someone who actually loves us, totally, divinely loves us, in a sense where there is no separation, it's remarkable that our mind doesn't go to thinking about that person more. But yet, Baba says that. It's not easy to think about me. It's not easy to love me. It's very difficult. It's very difficult to obey me. But keep doing this. You see, we don't expect an instantaneous thing. Our reaction is that we expect an instant thing. When we expect something from the God-man, what we really expect is the satisfaction of our desires, the very thing that holds us a slave. That's what we want. When we want results, the results that we want are the satisfaction of our desires. And it's our desires that enslave us. That's the paradox. We have to wake up to that. We have to remember that our consciousness is not free, but our consciousness is something that is beyond description. We have a treasure that is beyond description. The ordinariness of a human being and everything that comes out of his mouth, everything that is seen in his actions. In spite of that ordinariness, that individual houses a treasure. Consciousness. Consciousness is not seen as a treasure because it's not been used. It's not been used to reveal its magnificence. It's used to be down in the pit of illusion, believing that what is unreal is real. But we're carrying around that magnificent accomplishment that took aeons of time to accomplish. We're walking around with it. It is so accepted and so ignored, which is incredible. Far more so than the sun, which is nothing in comparison. Consciousness includes everything. The sun is ignored, and yet it sustains all of life on this planet. But it's ignored, except when it gets too hot or it's too absent, and then it's thought about. So that consciousness is the treasure. And that consciousness is absolutely enslaved. And the only thing that has the only possibility of counteracting that which occupies consciousness, that rivets consciousness, the only thing is the conviction one has in a true God-man. That's the only thing. And that conviction, being weak, must grow until it becomes very strong. And it can only grow by constantly trying to find your own way. Every single road leads to the goal. Every single road leads to the goal. That means every state of mind, every individual, wherever he is on a path to the goal. But who wants to go the long path? Who wants to go through all that suffering? Because that's exactly what imprisoned consciousness means. It is without a doubt, every thought is a shackle. So Baba says, try to be a witness. Try somehow to identify yourself with consciousness rather than that which holds consciousness captive, thoughts. Do that. He said, I am the way of doing that. Why Baba is so taken for granted is because he does not juggle illusion. He doesn't juggle illusion. Just as he said to those early disciples when they were so impressed that a stranger saw some kind of a magic thing coming from the bungalow where Baba was training his disciples. He saw this light emanate from this building. And they were saying, why? Why is it that we, your disciples, do not experience what a stranger experiences? And Baba's response was, you don't need these kinds of gimmicks. How cheap it is to allow ourselves to be swayed by these things. We have to do work and realize that it's nothing. Baba could give each one of us a planet and have everything on that planet that you think you want, and you'd have nothing because you're still enslaved. That's the point. You're still a slave. The king of the planet is a slave. The king of the universe is a slave because his consciousness has not been emancipated. That's how vulnerable we are. And the only key, I think what we have to realize is the only key is the God-man. That's what we have to realize. He said it. If one is there who has arrived at the goal, whose consciousness is totally emancipated. Remember what he said? You need me as a crutch. And he said, look how magnificent he is. At the right time, you can discard even me. At the right time. But what do you call a crutch that is absolutely indispensable? That's more than a crutch. But Baba is saying that you cannot do it on your own. If you think you make progress, you're kidding yourself. The events of life will bring you to another little rough place, will smash you up against the side or against another boulder. And you'll find out you didn't have any freedom after all. You have a certain freedom. You have a freedom to use your thoughts, to place them in the only secure harbor there is, on the God-man, and let him do his work. That's the point. Impersonal meditation is very good. It's very good because when you begin to think about Baba, obviously you begin to think about his universal qualities. The form aspect of it is merely to focus your mind. It's a reminder of what you really are. A reminder. And what is so irresistible about what you can see in the God-man is irresistible because it's closest to your heart, because that is you. That is you. So meditation has to go on as much as we can accomplish it during the course of the day. Now, bear in mind also that Baba is explaining all of these things once and for all. But at the same time, he says the shortcut is to hold on to me, To hold on to me ultimately over and over and over and over and over again is to keep your emotions under control by thinking about me, by realizing what your emotions are. They're your enemy. That's your link with your very limited past. To try somehow to contain them in the right way. The right way is to see them with some degree of detachment. That's the work we have to do. While we're feeling an emotion, we think about Baba, you're not going to get rid of the emotion. It has to go on. The thinking has to go on until there's some possibility of a change, until you begin to see the emotion for what it is. All of this is internal. It's what real spiritual work consists of. It's an internal thing that doesn't have the kind of visibility that perhaps is thought of as being spiritual work, but it's the real work. It's the work of the real hero, who knows that no matter what his mind places before him, he has to take it. And this is what Baba said. You have to, the conviction that you have to get is to find the way to believe that Baba is one totally in control of your life. That's no easy thing to do. These discourses, they do help us to appreciate Baba even more. Obviously, we need to appreciate him a great deal. And I think of the conviction that is not 100% needs to be fortified over and over and over again. And our minds are occupied with so many different kinds of ideas that are spread about by people who seem to know what they're saying. And always Baba gives you such a clear explanation of all of these things. And at the bottom of it is anything that helps you to think about me is a good thing. Another thing at the bottom is think of me in any way that you can, and in time you'll think of me in the right way. These are the things. Love cuts through everything. And when we begin to wake up to what Baba's reality really is and how intimately we are connected with it, it becomes so irresistible that true love begins to blossom. And when that happens, everything else melts away. There's no value to anything else except that love. And everything that's good comes in the wake of that love that begins to become awakened. And he is the awakener, the awakener. I have come not to teach, but to awaken. It's important to realize that no matter what it is we do, no matter how successful we are in terms of accomplishing that which many observing would say is a very formidable accomplishment, that to that individual he is not satisfied, nor will you ever be satisfied. The only time that you'll be satisfied is when your consciousness becomes disengaged from your mind. And that is the reason why, even at the stage when, let's say, your accomplishments are very minuscule as compared with someone up here, everything's relative. In the relative world, there's no accomplishment. What is an accomplishment, Baba says, is when you hold on to me, which means I have to become the focal point of your real effort. Your real effort. So that means that whether you're down here in terms of your life's work or your ability or your talent, you do the best you can and you don't worry about it, because the real thing that's happening is happening because you're thinking about me. See? And when you become less dissatisfied and do what you can, then you are doing the real work much better. And keep in mind that you are successful now. Keep in mind that you are successful.
his will.
Not to what?
A leaf without his will. Without, if he, yeah. So what does it mean? Does he? No leaf can dance without my will. Not a leaf quivers without my will. So what does it mean? Means he continues to exercise his will every time, each time there. What is that? What does it mean? Just as Patty asserts her self-will, and I say he has not to know it. That means you said, does he not know it? I said, no, he has not to know it. What does it mean? Means, who is asserting this? It is the heart is at it has flared up, just as you have the flares in the sun. It just flares up, you see. But you want to become one. You don't want to be the heart. You want to be it, the flame itself. You see, the effulgence.
And that is an obstacle also.
Pardon?
Is that obstacle also?
Yeah, that is also obstacle. So then what happens? Just wait. Don't be too hasty. Then what happens? The flare-up is so great that obstacle automatically disappears by His grace, and you begin to derive the charm of loving instead of becoming Him, instead of wanting to become Him, instead of wanting to merge in Him, you derive the charm of loving. Then you begin to love. Then you realize, then you become aware of what this great purpose of this whole creation is, nothing but to love. That's all. There is no purpose behind it except to love. It's nothing but love. So you begin to love. The charm of loving is there. Then you even forget whom you are loving. You are loving. Then that beloved, that divine beloved, that real self of yours,